Well, there comes a time in everybody's life where they got to really just look themselves in the mirror and face facts and admit that they're not doing quite as good a job cleaning their house as they should be. And that has led to this Black Friday purchase. You can see the Amazon delivery service was not extremely gentle. All right, let me get this thing out of the box and we'll take a look at it. So as you can see, this is the Roborock Qrevo Master. This is a robot vacuum cleaner. And this review, or introduction really is what it should be called, is really just going to be preliminary. I'm going to get this thing out. I'm going to get it set up. I'm going to do some first use stuff. But my personal opinion is anything like this, it's going to be really hard to tell within the first few days whether or not this thing is really, what you want out of a robot vacuum. I think that reviews of robot vacuums mostly focus on really easy to measure stuff, but what they don't focus on is kind of long-term experience. And so that's my plan, is I'll give you the introduction in this video, show you kind of any pain points in getting it set up or any immediate disappointments. And then I'll probably do a follow-up video in, I don't know, a month, 3 months, something like that. Once I feel like I've got a good grip on what this thing actually is like to live with. So anyway, I just want you to know that I understand really it's a long-term perspective that you want to take on one of these. So I will try to give you that in a future video. With that, let's get it out of the box and I'll start to give you my thoughts and experience on getting this thing set up. Now, one of the reasons I went with this, again, the Roborock Qrevo Master, is that this thing is supposed to be really good at mopping. I have only hard floors. I've got some vinyl fake wood floors. I've got tile. And so with no carpet in the house, I wanted to focus on something that did a good job at hard floors. And so this thing is supposed to be really good at that. So keep in mind that I'm only going to be using this thing on hard surfaces. So interestingly enough, the packaging is pretty good, I would say. They have on the inside this big setup flap that unfolds, that it basically gives you a walkthrough of, quick start. And so that's, pretty nice. You got your safety guidelines, and I think maybe this is a part of the base pedestal. Little ramp stuff. We got our little pads. Pretty sure that the mop pads for this are interchangeable with some of the other major kind of robot vacuum brands. The pad itself velcros on, so you can, replace these or take them off and wash them really easily. Here we have the vacuum itself. So I'm going to set this aside and just get this thing all the way unboxed. As I'm unboxing this thing, there is some plastic on the wrapping, but they do use mostly cardboard and formed cardboard for the packaging. So, that's good not to create too much in waste plastic just on packaging. All right, so I've got it out of the package. This is the main base station unit. So this thing has the ability to empty and clean itself. You will have to empty out the base unit. It's got dirty water on one side, clean water on the other. So these little containers have rubber seals on the lid to help keep them tight. There's also, if you look right here, you can see there's a little dot, and that looks like a magnet. So I'm guessing that this little float is probably using a magnet, and there's probably like a Hall effect sensor in here, so that whenever this thing fills up, it will float that, and then that change, there's going to be that sensor in there that can sense that magnet. That's probably how it's going to alert you whenever the dirty water is full, and that it will stop filling it and probably give you an alert to change it. Inside, you've got your seals for the water, and so this one's going to be, I guess, the fill for the clean water side. This, I'm guessing, is going to be some sort of drain. Not sure what these others are. Again, I don't know what all system. I haven't turned this thing on yet. I'm not going to tear this thing down if that's what you were hoping for in this video. I paid my own money for this thing. And so, it's something that I need to use, and I don't want to get it apart and not be able to get it back together or break it or something like that. So we're going to leave it as is for now. In the front here is where you're going to find the vacuum bag. So this thing does wet and dry. it empties the vacuum into this bag, and these things just slide out. So I'm pretty sure these are designed to be disposable, and so, you know, I would have loved to have seen a reusable bag, because I think you're gonna have to buy these if you get one, i.e. I think I'm gonna have to buy these. But I'll look and see what these cost online to see kind of what you're gonna be in for on these bags. It's also interesting, they have a little slide drawer in here. And so that door seems to just be whenever you're changing out these bags that it will, you know, keep you from spilling dust everywhere. It's also interesting that on the bag itself, there's a sliding door also to keep it from leaking. So I guess, you know, that's kind of interesting. So you can have this thing open, slide it in, and it locks in pretty good. So that seems to be actually pretty well designed. There's a little screen back here, and I'm guessing this is on the vacuum assembly itself. So basically, this thing is going to vacuum empty the actual robot. On the bottom, we've got the washer. There's some positioning sensors, and then these little washer stands. Basically, whenever the robot parks, it's gonna put these pads on these little washers, and then it will rotate them, and that will scrub these and rinse them off for you. And so, like I said, it cleans itself. Little sticker suggests that this ought to pop out so that you can take this and clean it. There's also a little wiper assembly here. I'm not sure what that is, if that's just to scrape the schmoo off the bottom and then it must get, I don't know, flushed or sucked out. And that's kind of all I think we can look at on the base station. Yeah, on the back, there's nothing but the hookup for the power. So let me get you some dimensions on this, just so you'll know kind of how big this thing is. And I know that may seem silly because you can look up dimensions online, but I think it's always, for me, worth checking whether or not it matches. So looking at about 20.5 inches tall. So like about 13.25 on the width. Maybe 13.5 here at the widest point because there's a bit of draft on the sides from the molds. Yeah, 13 3/8. And then on the depth, it's gonna depend a little bit on where you take the measurement. Say it's a good 10 inches for the main body. And then this base, if you put it on, you're gonna need a full 19.25 inches. So just in case you're curious about the dimensions, that's what I've got for measurements. Now let's move on and take a look at the main robot. So the robot itself looks to be roughly 14 inches in diameter. On the top panel, this is where you can access the filter. It does look like this filter is reusable. It shows some instructions on how to wash it, so that's nice. Held on by a couple of magnets. You got all your sensors here in the front. Back, we got a couple control buttons. It says reactivate AI. You know, one of the issues on, you know, these kind of high-tech robots is that they use vision systems, and, you know, people can be a little worried about, you know, is this thing, you know, mapping out my home? Is it taking photos of me? Stuff like that. And the answer is, yeah, it is. So this actually has a little sticker here that claims that all of the images that this thing uses for obstacle avoidance are processed on the machine itself. So it says that they are processed locally and that they are deleted after use. So the only issues I have with that are, number one, how do you verify that that's true? And I guess if it works offline, then, you know, I guess you'd have to believe that. The second thing is it says images taken for obstacle avoidance. Does that mean that there are images taken for other purposes that are not deleted? Well, that's, you know, the loophole that I see in the language that's written on the sticker, at least. Of course, that is all based on whether or not they're lying anyway on the sticker. You know, I don't know. I bought it, so we'll see. But they do have this thing covered up at first, so I guess you could just leave this sticker on because I'm assuming that that's where the cameras are. Yeah, looks like you got a couple cameras. So, you know, I guess you could always cover those up and it just might not work as well. Not sure on top if this is, yeah, it looks like more sensors on top housed in this thing. So you see this thing sticking out the bottom here. It's got a little swing out arm with a rotating brush so that it can get into corners. It's got a bumper so that it can bounce into stuff, bounce off. So what do we got on the bottom? We've got dual rotating brushes. And it looks like, yeah, you can pop these out and clean them. So that's a nice feature that all this seems to be cleanable. These are pretty soft, so that doesn't seem to be too bad. They're also non-interchangeable, so that I guess these things are directional and they don't want you to mix them up. So what's interesting is they've actually both color-coded and shape-coded the drive system on these. So if you look at that, you'll see that the black one is a pentagon and the gray one is kind of a star assembly. And that means you cannot interchange these things. They must be oriented correctly or they won't go in, which is nice because that means you don't have to worry about, you know, which one went where. It only goes together one way. We got more little vision sensors, it looks like, on the bottom. And then it just goes right into the vacuum here. Now it said, caution sharp blades inside. There are actually tiny little metal blades. Let me see if I can get this in the screen. Right here, you'll see little metal blades, and I'm guessing that's so that if this thing gets bound up with hair, it's probably going to cut that to help the rollers keep spinning. So that's kind of interesting. You know, these things have pretty good reviews, and they've clearly, you know, thought a lot about how these things work, and they have iterated on them for a while now, so I am guessing that they are fairly well sorted. We also have the two drive mechanisms for the mops, and one of them swings out so that it can get edges. The mops themselves just pop right in, and these are held in by magnets. I can feel them in there. So once they go in, that's just magnets holding them in, so they're going to be able to pop off pretty easy. And they come together pretty good there in the middle. So there's your hardware on this stuff. The next thing I'm going to start looking at is the software setup, because that's one thing that I'm kind of concerned about is how invasive is the app? You know, can this thing be used offline? I assume that it can't. I went into this thing assuming that it had to be online to work. I don't like that, but I'm going to check that just to make sure. This thing in particular is meant to do really well on mopping tests that I have seen. So I'll give you, again, preliminary looks at how it performs, but again, I'll check back in a couple, 3 months and give you a follow-up just to verify, does it keep performing well? One nitpick right away that I know is a small thing, but this plug sticks in and it's not a right angle plug. And so it means that due to bending radius, this thing does stick out of the wall a pretty good bit. And my plugs in my house are low enough that that basically means that I can't have the machine in front of the outlet, which is where I had planned to put it. It's a little nitpick, but that is what I think. So that's what's in the box. You got the robot, you got the base station, you got an extra spare bag, you got your power cord, and you're good to go. So let me start looking at getting this thing set up. Getting this thing set up, I filled the clean water all the way to the max, and I just wanted to point out, if you do that and you tip this thing over, it has a little vent hole over here, and so it will leak out of this top. The lid doesn't just pop off. It is good enough that if you've got it full, and you're not just slinging around, you can pick it up by that handle. It's not going to pop open on you. All right, it's time to talk about the initial experience. Getting the Roborock set up was pretty straightforward. You get it docked and homed by just pushing a button whenever it's in front of the dock, and it kind of sorts itself out and then docks. You get it connected to the Wi-Fi by holding down these two buttons while you've got the app loaded up. You do have to sign into the app. The app does require internet access. All right, so in order to receive updates, you acknowledge that in the future, we or an authorized third-party marketing service provider may use your personal information to send promotional materials related to our products or services. Interesting. Well, I guess we want updates. Nope. So to control this device through the app interface, you do have to have internet connection to both the device, to your phone. The app has to basically go through servers to talk to this thing. Now, once I got it set up, I was eventually able to get this thing moved over to a Wi-Fi network that did not have internet access, but then I found out that's useless because you can't actually do anything with the device other than do a manual cleaning cycle. You can't adjust anything without the app, and the app does require internet. So if you're looking for something to use offline, this thing can do very, very basic stuff offline, but you can't really do anything else. The app itself does have a lot of cool features. It pretty much automatically identifies different rooms. It maps everything out really, really well. You can set up virtual walls to block off different sections if you want to. You can do manual kind of cleaning runs where you select only the specific rooms that you want. You can also set up different types of cleaning, how much water you want it to use, how much suction you want the vacuum to use. You can adjust the light intensity. You can adjust the volume for the audio notifications. It's a pretty robust app interface, and I was not disappointed at all at the flexibility and configurability that I found therein. Now, the performance of the robot itself, it was a little quicker than I expected. It was able to vacuum and mop a little over 500 square feet per hour, something around 530, 540. Whenever it's mopping, every 15 minutes it goes and docks itself to clean the mop. That does a pretty decent job. These are the mop pads that have been cleaned since the previous cleaning. They really aren't stained up too bad, so I was pretty happy about its ability to clean itself. I'll also point out that as far as its cleaning efficiency, I started off with pretty dirty floors because I wanted to really see what the thing is capable of. The vacuuming on a hard floor surface does pretty well, actually. The mopping, look, it's not gonna get a dirty floor really, really clean. I do think that it would get like a floor that you've already cleaned really well. It would be able to maintain that for you. So I was satisfied with the mopping, but don't expect that this thing is gonna go in and get stains up off the floor or anything else like that. Anything serious on the floor, you're gonna need to clean. This is really more of just a cleaning maintenance robot, I would say. It does pretty well with like disasters. I had a couple of issues where I had left out cables on accident, just wasn't thinking about it, wasn't actually thinking about the rooms that it was going to be going in, and it would get kind of hung up and it gives you an audible alert. Then I went in, I detangled it, you set it back down, and it kind of reorients itself, picks back up right where it left off. So I was pretty satisfied about that. Now, whenever it redocks, it's going to go in, it's going to pump out all the dirty water, it's going to vacuum out its own internal dust canister, and once it's done, you will hear the base station making some fan noise for a while. And that is, it is drying everything out internally, and I'm sure that's to keep things like mold and stuff like that to a minimum. You also will want to be pretty on the ball about emptying the dirty water, because otherwise, I mean, you're going to get some really gross stuff growing in there. So I emptied out the dirty water at least every other day and cleaned that bin out. Now, I haven't really looked this thing over. I've been using it for a few days, so let's see kind of what everything's looking like. So the internal filter currently is not real bad. You can take this thing out and clean it if you want. It's done a pretty good job of kind of emptying itself out after it vacuums, so no real issues with that at all. As far as on the bottom, I haven't had too many tangles or anything. Unfortunately, those who have been on the channel for a while know that my dog had cancer and he did pass away about a month ago. That's been pretty rough, but it does mean that I have much less pet hair to deal with now. He shed quite a bit, and so there is still some remnants where this is where it goes into corners and things, and so there is still a little bit of hair, but nothing too serious. And it hasn't had any difficulties. I haven't really had this thing bind up on anything that wasn't a true emergency. The other kind of funny thing is, so the AI system works pretty well for recognizing different pieces of furniture, but it also notices things like cloth on the floor, so it'll notice like a laundry pile, and it will avoid it. So that also, I've seen work so far pretty well in my experience. The other thing that I set up was that there is an integration for Home Assistant for Roborock. It does allow for changing some settings. It does have manual control built in. It's not as robust and fully functional as the Roborock app itself, but it does work, and it does have kind of the basics in there if you want to control this thing through Home Assistant. However, that does still go through Roborock servers and stuff, so you can't use that as a supplement for having internet access on the device, unfortunately. So overall, I'm pretty satisfied with the Roborock Qrevo Master. It does a decent job vacuuming. It does a decent job mopping. It's really easy to use. It's not super loud. I mean, look, if you're watching a movie or something, you're not gonna want it running. But like if you're in the kitchen doing stuff and you got the TV on, you're kind of listening to it, you can hear that over this vacuum. It's not so loud that you can't do other stuff. You know, it's noisy, it's a vacuum, but it's not as loud as a regular stand-up vacuum cleaner or anything like that. So yeah, overall, I think so far I'm pretty happy. These things aren't cheap, obviously, and I did pay my own money for this. So whenever I say that, keep in mind, you know, this thing was over $950 after tax whenever I bought it, and that was on sale. So with the expense level, I do think you really got to think about, you know, are you going to appreciate what having a robot vacuum and mop gives you? It's not going to get everything super clean. It is more of a maintenance item, but I found that running the thing every day does maintain a pretty decent level of cleanliness on the floors. And it reduces my stress. Like if somebody pops by, I'm not going to be super worried about everything being super dirty. And so for that, I do think as a maintenance item, you know, it's going to be a good deal for me. Now, that's my short-term view. We'll see what happens after a couple of months, after a few months. You know, do problems pop up? Do I start having issues? What do I see as far as its ability to keep the floor clean over longer periods of time? Well, we'll find out. So, you know, probably in 2 or 3 months, I'll be posting a follow-up longer-term review, and we'll see if any of those thoughts change. Now, that's going to be it for this video. If you got any questions or comments or any feedback, feel free to leave a comment down below. Otherwise, as always, I appreciate your time.